If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything that you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on any listening platform like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many, many more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. From Battlefield Studio Alpha, welcome to the Wartime Leadership Podcast, where we explore what spiritual resiliency looks like from different perspectives. We too often focus on the physical, emotional, and social areas of resiliency, but we often neglect the spiritual pillar. Now, the spiritual pillar, it looks different for everyone. We will be exploring what spiritual resilience looks like in the lives of our guests, who are people from all different walks of life. I'm your host, Nathan Coy, and today's episode is sponsored by Success Draft, where we help you transform your dreams into drafted plans. Head over to successdraft.com to get started on your future today. Wartime Leadership is going international, folks, all the way to the Italian coast. Today we have Robert Pardi. And let me tell you, folks, this man knows how to party. It's literally in his name. He parties every day. Robert, welcome.
Thank you very much, Nathan, for having me. I love your show, so this is something extremely special. And yeah, maybe that party gene is what brought me here to Italy.
Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean,
so I am a New Yorker, though. So everyone knows I am a New Yorker, transplanted New Yorker. So
now, do you make New York style pizza in Italy?
No, but I wish I had it. But tell you the truth, no. Rome, I lived in Rome for a while. Amazing pizza. Where I live now, they make pizza out of potato dough because I'm in the mountains. And I have to say, it's pretty interesting.
Wow. So we make ours out of matzah for my son because he can't have gluten. So we make it out of matzah. So
okay,
fairly similar. I'll have to try it actually with the potato side of it.
There you go.
Hey, so listen, folks, I've sat down and I had one really, really long conversation with Robert. And I have to tell you that after that conversation, it felt like we had known each other for several years. I totally agree. There was a kindred spirit there that just really, Robert's story is absolutely amazing. And I'm glad that you agreed, brother, to sit down and have this conversation because your story needs to be known.
Well, and thank you very much. And one thing I want to say as well is whenever I can in any way participate in helping men and women in uniform, damn, I'm right there because what you all do is amazing.
Well, appreciate that 100%. So we're trying something new, Robert. I know you listen to the show. So what I'm doing is in order for you to not have any lead in, I am changing up the questions. So I have a random generator for questions. So I got a new.
All right, here we go.
What is the weirdest thing that someone's caught you doing?
Wow. What is it? Boy, these are going to be tough to answer because, I do a lot of weird stuff. And you know what? I can't think of the weirdest, but I'll pull something that just happened recently. So I was down in Puglia and I was doing some work there. And we went to this place that had this amazing beach. And I was like, we got to go in. And my friends are like, well, we can't. We don't have bathing suits and stuff like that. And, there were people on the beach. And I'm like, well, I don't care. And I stripped down and I jumped in the water because I'm like, I'm not missing this opportunity. And so I guess I would say that was a weird thing that I've done recently.
Oh, well, that when you told me that story originally, I was like, oh boy. And I bet you're like, come on, guys, we're in Italy.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm wearing underwear, so it's not like it looks like a bathing suit. The Italians wear those Speedos, which, let's just leave that alone. So at least I had boxers on. But yeah, hey, I'm all about the moment. I'm all about embracing it. I'm all about memories and stuff. So, and the water was amazing.
Oh, absolutely. So, question number 2, what skill or talent do you wish you had or were better at?
Wow. I would say that I wish I was better at organization. And it's really crazy because my life situation, which we'll probably talk about, required me to be extremely organized. But for myself, I'm not organized at all. Like I lose my glasses, I don't know how often, or other things. I mean, I just forget about doing things that just doesn't stay on my mind, even if I write it down. So I would say organized.
Yeah, I actually flow in between being organized and unorganized. And it's really weird because like whenever I get into that mood, like I'm putting stuff away and getting it organized. And then like a week later, everything will be all over the place because my wife does not like that.
I've completely missed important things when it comes to sort of, like going to what's called the town hall here or something like that to take care of some situation with documents or whatever. And I have it written down, it pops up on my computer, and then just sort of goes away. So.
All right. So number 3, if you were free, if you were free to murder one person without getting punished, would you?
Wow. No, I wouldn't. I thought it was going to be, it was going to ask me who. I'm so glad it didn't. But no. And honestly, because, and this is probably something that would tie into resilience as well, is everything and everybody is something to learn from. So, yeah, no.
Okay. Well, here we go. Completely random. What is the longest time span you could live without your phone?
Oh, forever. My whole life. This summer, as a matter of fact, I, in a way, sort of took a sabbatical, and it just happened to be where I had very poor reception, and I didn't miss my phone at all.
Yeah, and it's actually hard to get in contact with you sometimes because you're away and disconnected.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I think it's, part of resilience, right? For me is understanding boundaries as well, because our energy, we have to protect our energy. And if we don't create those boundaries and we're always getting pulled into things, those resources that we might need to be and call on to resilience might not be there. So I'm very, very protective of times. It's just this summer, as you know, was a little nuts because these little towns in Italy are not made for tourists. So during the summer, the influx of tourists overwhelmed the cell system. And so,
yeah. And it's nice that you live there. You can actually go out and enjoy those towns when tourists aren't there.
Yeah.
That's the enjoyment.
Very true.
All right, here we go. If you could start a band, what kind would it be and what would you name it?
Wow. Okay. I would name it Possibility in Action just because anything I could put possibility in action on, I would, for sure, because that's, as you know, my life's philosophy. What type of band would it be? I would definitely say alternative rock.
Alternative rock.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, why alternative?
But you know what? Well, what is like, maybe alternative rock today is not the same as it was when I thought the 90s, like Hootie and the Blowfish and stuff like that, that type of music.
See, and I'm from South Carolina, right here in the heart of where Hootie and the Blowfish is from. So we get to see them perform often.
Wow. So great. But is it alternative rock? Back then, I think they were alternative rock. Matchbox 20, I don't know. I thought they were all in that same group, but.
Yeah, I would definitely put Matchbox 20 into that genre. I don't know if Hootie, I don't know what kind of.
Because Hootie's not country.
No.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I'm going to have to figure out.
The Hootie block, that my band would be the Hootie cover band.
The Hootie block. I really like it. And already this conversation is going great. So, hey, let's go ahead and transition
Sure.
into your background. I want to know what has brought you up to this point in your life. Where were you in New York, and then somehow you ended up here in Italy, and just kind of take us through that background.
Sure. My background, we could talk all day about my background. So I'm going to try to summarize the whole thing. And I'm going to start actually from my childhood, because I think it's really important in terms of the arc of everything, because it was my childhood that taught me all the life skills. And so I grew up with an abusive alcoholic father. And of course, as a kid, that teaches you a lot about uncertainty, fears. And then at a certain age, I defended myself and I stepped into my Rocky moment. And it was actually when the Rocky movies were out, right? In the mid 70s. And I drank the raw eggs. I was totally into but that in a way helped me understand personal power, even though I couldn't define it as I define all that stuff today. And I started paving my path towards, getting away. And getting away for me as a young kid was money. The only thing I could think of as a young kid, especially around the age of 13. And again, also, hey, then I started growing up. There was Dynasty, there was Gordon Gekko. It was all about money, right? So I was like, I need to make money. And in that period, that's when I learned about grit as well, because my objective was, you know what? I started working when I was 13. I'd go to load bags of potatoes and stuff on trucks in the morning before I went to school. And I was like, whatever I need to do to get money. Then in university, I studied economics. I met an amazing woman. I like to say probably the most amazing woman I will ever meet in my life. And just, fell in love very quickly. She was 17. I was 19. We got married very, very young. She was 21. I was 23. And our life was just moving ahead. I was always in that money mode, because for me, money was going to be safety and security. There was no way around it. And it was buying me my ticket to freedom. Then I was offered a job in the Middle East. I always had a desire to travel. My paternal grandmother, a great little Italian woman, like 4 foot nothing, she lost her husband very, very young. And she used to say, which is a word I know we're not supposed to use today, but I have to say it because it's what came out of her mouth. And she meant it in a good way. She said, you have to live like a gypsy. You have to experience and see and not be afraid. And she taught me all of this stuff, which was incredible. So there was this job opportunity. My wife was doing an MD PhD, and she said, you know what? I'm just finishing my PhD right now. So why don't you take the job? I'll meet you in a year. But in the meantime, we could meet every so often in a different country, which was all very romantic. And we were young, and it was like, yeah, that would be so great. We met in Paris and all these different places. So all the money I was making in the Middle East was not going in the bank, unfortunately. And so when she finished her PhD and came out to live with me in the United Arab Emirates, you have to go through a medical screening to get a residence visa. And they found that she had late stage breast cancer right before her 31st birthday. And back then, you couldn't fault anyone, right? She had a lump in her breast. Her gynecologist told her not to worry about it. It was the late 90s. Young women with no history, no risk factors, were not sent for biopsies or scans. So no fault by anyone, but here she was, and that changed the trajectory of everything. She wound up she finished her degree, her MD PhD, graduated at the top of her class. I didn't really need to take care of her, but I was the middle. This is the strange thing. And it was a New York Times front page article, actually, because I was the middle person. She said to me, Robert, I know enough of medicine to be dangerous to myself. I don't want to judge what I'm doing. I just want to know I'm doing my best. So I don't want to know anything about my disease. And she would go in, she'd meet the doctor, then she would walk out. And I would chat with the doctor about what was going on, and I would get the results. So as the cancer started to progress, I wanted to take more and more time off of work. And I actually wound up leaving work full time. And not because she needed the care support from a physical standpoint, but I wanted to be there, one, for the moments. Two, I wanted to help support her to achieve her dreams. That's sort of how the whole life coaching comes in further on. And she actually wound up becoming the founding director of palliative care at New York Hospital with metastatic breast cancer. And she died a couple of years after she became the founding director. I was lost. I went through some difficult life transitions for sure. I didn't know what my purpose was anymore, because she was my purpose. I say all the time that loss is the lack of self. So I lost my identity and security. So the second S is the world. I lost security in life. It didn't seem safe anymore. So I just went through the motions, but everything I learned as a child, which helped me take care of my wife, and we lived an amazing life while she had metastatic breast cancer. She had cancer for 11 years. She basically had chemo every other Friday for 11 years. And we lived an amazing life. We laughed, and I remember joy more than anything else. And she would have said the same thing, which is why my first book is all about that journey. And so basically the idea of, what we're talking about in terms of resilience and dreaming and wanting to step back into life popped up. And I looked at it not from a fear of failure point of view, because the worst sort of happened already, right? And so I said to myself, what is the craziest dream I want to live? What's the story I want to look back on? And it was to live in Italy. So I spoke to my business partner. I quit. I showed up in Italy, 2 suitcases, not speaking the language, not knowing anyone, not having a job, and not having a place to live. And I said, okay, here I am. Now, what I realized with Desiree and the whole that I wound up sort of being her life coach, when I was looking to reconstruct my life, I realized I didn't miss a relationship. I missed that ability to help and to support. And I said, you know what? That's life coaching. So I'm going to go and become a life coach. And you know what? I'm going to do it in Italian so I can force myself to learn Italian. And so there I went, became a life coach. And then it just sort of, because of who my wife was, because of the New York Times article, because I was in the palliative care community, I immediately had clients. But it was more in the caregiving, surviving spouse sector. But as my story started to become more known of picking up and changing my life and moving to Italy, people started knocking on my door saying, I want to know how to do that, which is where sort of a lot of my resilience work started coming in and talking about those things. After that transition to transformation, I started thinking about hosting retreats, and I made an investment in a tour company in Rome. And right before COVID, I went to New York to market the idea of transformational travel. Well, Italy explodes with COVID. The company goes bankrupt. I lose all the money. And I'm back at square one in a way. And funny enough, a friend of mine, who was also a friend of my wife's, who was also in the chemotherapy center getting her treatment, after my wife passed away, said, you really need to write a book. And I'm like, yeah, that's just not me. Well, she started asking me stories during the years. And then when COVID happened, she said, the way you and Desiree confronted adversity and uncertainty is extremely important right now. You need to write a book. And here is an outline of all the stories you've told me. And so that's why she's my co-author. And I just looked at it. And as I started reading it, one, I fell in love with my wife even more. But second, I was like, wow, you know what? This is an example of rising above complacency. This is an example of living in the moment. This is an example of joy always exists regardless of adversity. Yeah, I want to tell the story, which then opened up this desire to write. And I wrote 2 other books as well. So I wrote 3 books in 1 year, and here we are.
And the books, I love the names, right? So you have Chasing Life.
Yeah.
You have Possibility in Action. And then what's the name of the third?
So the third is, it's called A Pimby Tale. Now, the funny thing is, it is a children's book written for adults. And I wrote it really for myself. Actually, all 3 books, to tell you the truth, is about self-expression, stepping into really my identity. But A Pimby Tale is all about how, as kids, we live in imagination and possibilities, and we lose that as we become adults. And that's where innovation comes from. That's where so much comes from. So PIMBY is an acronym, because I love acronyms, as you saw with loss. PIMBY is an acronym for possibility, imagination, magic, believing, and the Y is you. And it's about a little boy who, right before his 9th birthday, goes on this magical journey with this little PIMBY creature and learns about life lessons. You know, not to make mistakes and not to have fear, but it's to spark that curiosity and imagination, which will tie into spiritual resilience. Because for sure, for me, I know 100% because of the way I've lived, but also with my clients, and it's a core of possibility and action, that curiosity and imagination are fuel for resilience. 100%.
Absolutely. I think you have to have the sense of imagination in order to think about the possibilities of what is out there.
Exactly. And you have to accept the fact that it is imagination. We as adults believe we can predict, but every prediction we make is based in imagination to a certain extent, because we never know what the forces are going to be. So if you let go and you surrender that fact, and I talk all the time about, especially with my clients, that we live in the in-between. Once we make peace with that, and the in-between is, it may happen or it may not happen. That is certainty. Those are the only 2 choices that really are the outcome. And we're in the middle. So it's understanding the fact that, no, I can't predict everything. And that's why I love the book. It's not really a popular book because it's not understood, of course, because, a book that's written, it's a fable for adults. But I love it. So
when you're able to speak about it, right? You know, the passion of what it was, this idea of possibility, it's a 50-50%, right? It really is that 50-50%. And you're sitting there in the middle of it going, okay, what am I going to do to make this happen? Or what am I going to do to not make this happen?
And what I'll add to that as well is it's the idea of best. And I have to say, in a way, I sort of learned this from my wife, right? Because she didn't want to know about her disease and stuff like that. I'll also add to that, she didn't know her GPA score from university because she didn't want to know. She never wanted to judge herself. 4.0, by the way, but that's okay. She didn't know her MCAT scores. She didn't know the scores on her boards. She didn't want to know any of that. She's like, I want to know I'm doing my best. And so that's how we live in the in-between, is knowing we're showing up and we're doing our best. But the thing is not to judge it. My best tomorrow, if I don't sleep well tonight, might only be 20%. But my intention is to show up and give that 20%. Maybe the next day it's going to be 100. So a lot of this understanding how to, and I use the term use life instead of being used by life, is understanding some of the parameters and just making peace with it. Don't constantly fight against something that is out of your control. And I believe, I don't know if we spoke about it or maybe I heard it on a podcast or I read something about it, that you talked about stoicism, or there was something about stoicism somewhere along the way. And that's one of the Stoic philosophies. Everything I'm talking about, they talked about 2,000 years ago. I mean, the problem, what we've fallen into today, and I'll be bold enough to say that we have fallen into this idea of self-help and distraction. None of us need to be helped. None of us need to be fixed, first of all. We have everything we need. We just have to step back into it. So it's about awareness more than help. The second thing that I would say is that we read and read and read, but that's not what any philosopher ever said. They said, read something, find what resonates with you, and put it into action. You can't study life. You can't study it. And that's leadership. That's everything. It's not a something that you can finally get the answer and it's going to be perfect. It's something that you constantly hone. And I talk all the time that, our life is a work of art. We're constantly honing it. We're constantly adding color. We're building a mosaic. We could talk about sculpting. We're chipping away the unnecessary. Mm-hmm. And so that requires us to be open, surrender, use our imagination, stay curious. And if you enter life as the explorer, you can really mitigate the fear of failure, because scientists don't fail. They just get data. So,
wow. I think it was Thomas Edison that said that he didn't learn, or he didn't fail 1,000 times in creating the light bulb. He found 1,000 ways not to have a light bulb.
Yes.
And that's, it's perspective, right? A lot of this is perspective and how we view the world. And you could have looked at it in a completely different way. You took my wife, and you did for a little bit, right? You did kind of look at it in this negative sense for a little bit, but you stepped back and you looked at it from a different perspective.
Yes. It's so funny you use the word took, because I think that's so important, because my mother sits there. My father died in 1999, and she still talks about that he was taken too young. And I joke with her. I'm like, well, if you want to play the numbers game, he was 59, Desiree was 41. So I win the too young argument already. So let's leave that alone.
Wow.
But it's that idea of taken. And that's where we go back to life is using us. And nothing is really taken. These are all sort of natural events. We don't want things to happen. My discomfort, and I have to say, I don't know what it's like to lose somebody unexpectedly. I mean, it was still unexpected because she continued to rally. They told me 3 years. It was 11 years. She was still, working, and I just didn't, let's say, expect it. But the thing about palliative care and what I learned from her is, we are all on a terminal train, unfortunately. That's the reality of life. We don't know when our stop is, but it stops. And she explained to me there's a difference between extending life and extending death. And she was never going to return to the life she wanted when she was in the hospital for the last time. And it was obvious. So I didn't have the anger of her passing, but really what was eating me inside was I had to grieve myself, because the expectations of who I was supposed to be and the life I was supposed to live were gone. And it's not that I pointed my finger blaming at anyone, but I was lost, completely lost in, well, okay, this was the whole plan I had in front of me. Now the bridge has collapsed. And so where do I go from here?
Yeah. Now the article that you're talking about was from April 3rd, right? 2010.
It was 2010. I don't remember if it was April 3rd. I think so. It was Easter Sunday, which is the craziest thing in and of itself, because
it was called Helping Patients Face Death. She Fought to Live.
Yes.
And if you read the article, like, how did that article come to be?
Wow. So, and of course, an article does not get on the front page of the New York Times unless it's sensationalized.
Yeah.
So my wife was being interviewed by the reporter on something a little different, and my wife passed away during the interview. And the reporter came to the funeral and said to me, "Oh, I'm so-and-so. I was interviewing your wife. She said some interesting things during the interview. One of them being she felt like a hypocrite, which is in the article." And I said, "I know, she told me." And she said, "Well, we want to go in a different direction with the article." And I knew that they were going to play up on some of that stuff, which is why even the title is like, really? And so my wife's whole mission from the moment she was diagnosed, she was on the Oprah Winfrey show as well, was to bring awareness to patient choice. And yeah, she didn't help. Unfortunately, palliative care is really misunderstood. So people don't get palliative care when they should. They get it at the end of their life. So you have to make that transition comfortable. So that's, let's say, helping people die, as the article says. And she fought to live, meaning that, yeah, she wanted to be aggressive and all of that other stuff. But you know why she passed away? Because she told me in the hospital. She said, "Robert, I'm tired." And I said, "Okay, baby, rest." And I knew she was telling me to transition to comfort care. So, her belief was, I am going to run as hard as I can, but there will be a time probably that my body can't handle it, but I'm willing to take that choice. And so she spoke a lot about patient choice. And that's what the article, if you really look at it non-judgingly, you realize that we should all have the ability to live our life, which includes the arc of an illness. The illness should not dictate how we live. We should fit the illness into the way we want to live.
Oh, that's such a great way of putting that. That is such an amazing way of putting it. But I guess the question I have is, what is the difference between palliative care and hospice?
Excellent question. So hospice is the last stage of palliative care. In reality, palliative care is all about quality of life. So if you're diagnosed with diabetes, if you're diagnosed with MS, if you're diagnosed with a terminal disease, palliative care should be involved to help you manage symptoms, control pain, so you have a good quality of life with the disease. If it progresses to the point where, again, it's the difference between extending life and extending death, you're at the extending death point and the body is not going to ever recover, that's when hospice comes in to make the transition easy or less painful for the patient. This is where, it's very controversial, but it brings up the question, should we actually have doctor-assisted end of life? Because should someone sit in hospice for 6 months, constantly going to the bathroom on themselves and being in pain when there's absolutely no way that they're ever going to turn the corner? It's just you're waiting, you're managing symptoms until the body ceases. That's a very big question, but I think the whole idea of patient choice is that we should never be a victim to the institution that is managing the disease, because we're much more than the disease.
Yeah. And I know that back in the 80s and 90s, like, that was a big deal of assisted suicide. They were calling it patient assisted suicide with Dr. Kevorkian and those different big cases that were happening back then. So that's why I think sometimes people don't understand palatable care versus the hospice. They think, but they are different stages of the same process.
Exactly.
Now, you've mentioned it a few times, talking about resilience and spiritual resilience, because the point of this podcast. What is your definition? How do you define spiritual resilience?
So it's such a great question because, like you said, it's different for everybody. And for me, if you think about for me, Resilience in general, I just want to define it, is not about bouncing back. I'm a big believer, and it has nothing to do with bouncing back. It has to do with bouncing beyond that which we thought would crush us. Resilience is about harnessing the transformation. Why would you want to go back to the static state? Wouldn't you want to move forward, bounce beyond, and have, let's say, thicker skin or more skills? So that, to me, is resilience, which is why I wanted to say it, because it changes the dynamic a little bit of spiritual resilience. In that bouncing beyond, there's a few things that take place. Is that you are having faith in that there is a beyond. You are sitting there and you are realizing that what you bring to the table is the choice not to sit where you are. So it's having trust in yourself as well. So the spiritual side of that comes, in my opinion, from trusting yourself and trusting it is possible. There's something on the other side. For me personally, to tell you the truth, I think we're all born resilient. And it's obvious, right? The human race wouldn't be here. We've all had our back against the wall, and we've all said, I can't take one more thing, but we're all here. So we're all resilient. We've lost touch with the ability to actually access it. A lot of times what happens when hard things happen, and I can say this, look, the son of an alcoholic dad, when they told me my wife's cancer was unstoppable, it came back and they're like, we're never going to get this under control because it's that aggressive. Even though she lived another 7 years, I was going to get our pizza in the evening, and I'd say, could you give me a coffee cup with some wine in it? So I could drink it in the street, because I needed to distract myself. And what's happened is we've confused resilience with distraction. We get a massage, or we go run and we work out. We don't do anything, but we calm our mind. But really, the resilience is at that point when it's really, really tough to have faith in ourselves and faith that there's something on the other side to actually step in and be vulnerable and say, you know what, I'm going to feel this so I can deal with it. I can't keep pushing it away.
That is wisdom, right? Like I'm sitting here and I'm writing stuff down. I'm on page 4, just so you're aware of points that I'm getting, but bouncing beyond that which we thought would crush us. That is I like that. Bouncing beyond, right? Getting over the hump of what we thought was possible to destroy us.
What's so cool about all of this, right? Resilience and everything else is we are forever changed by anything we experience. And so there is no going back. Even the pandemic right now, you can never go back to who you were, how you thought. We could distract ourselves and make ourselves somewhat comfortable, but there's always going to be a little discomfort because we know something we can never forget. And that's what the beyond is all about. You have learned something you will never forget. It is part of you. So take it, move forward.
And I think you're right when you think about like a childlike faith, right? When you think about a childlike mentality going into this, back then we call it pretending, right? We called it, we were going to pretend that we were going to be this, and we were going to be successful in how we did it, and everything ended out really, really well in that childlike mentality of it. And then we get into the reality as we get older, like you said, you start to lose that perspective of a child, and instead you start going into this idea of, okay, it can go one way or the other, and it could be bad or it could be good. So to bounce beyond is still that idea of pretending. I'm pretending as if it can be better, and I'm going to make it happen.
That's exactly it. Thank you for flushing it out even better than I could say it, because it is, first of all, when you're a kid, right? How many times do you fall? You get back up. There is no fear. There is no whatever. It's all part of the learning thing. Then we learn how to label and we do everything else. But, the idea of, let's say, pretending, when you ventured out for this podcast, when you did it, to a certain extent, it was pretending. Anyway, it was seeing something that could be possible. There's a different emotion involved in it when you are you're instituting the change, when it is something that you are enthusiastic about. But when it's something hard, or we feel has been done to us, if we're in a victim mentality, we fight like, this is not the way it should be. But if we can sit in curiosity, that's why I said curiosity is so important for resilience. If we could sit in curiosity, that fosters that childlike faith of what's possible. Because I'm curious, right? The biggest question I ask myself whenever I'm anxious about things, and this is what fuels my resilience as well, is I never ask myself really, what if I fail? I ask myself, what if I can pull it off? That will fuel resilience. What if I can pull it off?
What if I can pull it off?
Yeah. I usually say, what if I can effing pull it off? So, just to give that extra little, so.
I think that's an amazing mentality to go away with it, because of the idea still of that child. What if I can get away with it? What if I can do something a little bit different next time to get beyond? And that's that resilience side, right? Bouncing beyond. Oh, I'm going to start using that. I'm sorry. I'm stealing it. Bouncing beyond what is there.
No worries. I know somebody else that's already stolen it as well. She sent it to me and she's like, look at what my tagline. And so it's like bouncing beyond crisis or something like that. So, but yeah, just think that the way you're talking to me right now, right? That excitement in terms of bouncing beyond, that fuels resilience. That says, I want to be resilient. Mm-hmm. I want to see what's beyond. I want to harness that childlike faith. And that's why that aspect of it, especially self-trust, is so important. If I was to define resilience at all, and like I said, that we're all resilient, I think it's the intersection of three domains. And I think this comes from Lord of the Rings or something, because I love all those types of movies. So it's our purpose. When you really know your why, you'll stand up to whatever you think is going to crush you and say no. It is your perspective, which you mentioned earlier. So it's that perspective of possibilities, that there are many different iterations. I talk about when something bad happens and you need to be resilient, that's rubble. You could put that rubble into many different combinations of a mosaic. You can create something out of that rubble. There's iterations upon iterations, right? So that's perspective. And then personal power. And in that personal power is self-trust, is the faith, is humor, laughing at the situation as well. Like, this happened. Wow, this is really crappy, and don't shy away from it. Like really, really look at it. What do they say? What is it? Rumpelstiltskin, once you know his name or something like that, then he disappears. Or, I'll go more with the Harry Potter and Voldemort, right? If you said his name, everyone thought it was going to be really bad, but Harry Potter said his name to make Voldemort less scary. So, it's stepping in perspective. So those are the three domains, in my opinion.
So what do you do in talking about these three domains, in talking about resiliency, spiritual resiliency specifically? How do you build it in yourself? Like, what have you done to kind of get beyond your situation?
Oh, great question. There are so many different tools that you can really use. Gratitude for everything. Now, here's the thing about gratitude. First of all, I'd ask all the listeners to really think about the question, are you happy with who you are? It's very important, in my opinion, for gratitude, because if you are happy with who you are, then you even have to thank the bad stuff. So don't separate everything, right? If you're not, then that's the moment to think about what can you work on. But gratitude is all about feeling the loss of something. It's not like, oh, this is such a pretty cup today, or I had such a great cup of coffee on my, well, how would you feel if you never had coffee again? That's where the gratitude comes from, right? So I practice a lot. I practice a lot of gratitude. I also remind myself all the time, and I'll use the word humility here, which is something that I talk about with my leadership work as well, is that I don't know everything. So for me to really be resilient is to say, I don't know everything. So therefore, there may be a solution, there may be a path, there may be a strategy that I'm not aware of yet. And I remind myself of, no, I'm not limited by just what I know. I'm limited about what I can learn. I'm not limited about what I know. I'm unlimited because of what I can learn. And that helps me fuel resilience as well. The other thing that I think is extremely important for anyone to think about when they are stepping into resilience is, one, remember the times that you've been resilient in the past, because you have. It's not something foreign. And accept that you're really pissed off about what happened. Let yourself feel that. And I say all the time, for me, when something happens where I'm going to have to be resilient and I have to step up, it's like throwing myself into a dark, dank well, and I hit face first and I'm eating all the gunk. And I remind myself, I don't want to taste this for the rest of my life. So now I better get moving. So think about the taste of the anger and the discomfort and the delusions and everything else that you have about the situation. Do you want to keep chewing on that? Because this is where my economics background comes in. The longer you're in that phase of anger and frustration and everything else, that's an opportunity cost. Staying there means you're not accepting other opportunities that are happening or possible. Because every yes is a no, every no is a yes. It's that whole trade-off. But the longer you sit, and I will say that anger can motivate you, but anger is definitely not sustainable. I was angry at my dad. It worked, but it wasn't sustainable. But the longer you're there, you're not really constructing.
You have given us a lot to unpack.
Cool.
And it's good. It's a good deal because it's leading to other thought-provoking conversations. And I know that you and I have had a really good conversation. That first conversation that you and I had was pure magic. Now, folks, I am blessed to be connected with Robert, and he sends voice messages every once in a while through LinkedIn. And it's amazing. It really brightens my day, Robert. You really have no idea, to be able to receive those and just having you feed into me on a personal level, right? And then you've done some good connecting with other people, and that's good and great. But the value in what I get from you is absolutely amazing. And the ideas that you have coming out soon, because I know that some of these ideas and the business concepts that you have are going to start to unfold over the next couple of years, and they're absolutely amazing, the ideas. And folks, you're going to want to stay tuned for what is going to unfold with Robert. Now, Robert, you have a website, Robert Pardi with an I. We'll have a link in the comments below, robertpardi.com, where people can get your books.
Yes.
Get other things like that. And to also connect with you in different ways. Best way is obviously LinkedIn, I think, for you.
Yeah, I'm more, Facebook and Instagram weren't around when I first started building my community, right? So LinkedIn is where I started, and I tend to hang out there more than anything else. I do have a Facebook and Instagram page as well, but
yeah, and I will tell you, Robert, when I was doing a little bit of looking and going through, I was looking at your Instagram feed, and I see the pictures of you and Desiree together, and you can just see the compassion, the love that you had for each other. It wasn't one directional by any means.
no.
And you see how you supported her in each of those pictures, those really, really young pictures all the way up to the later years. And you can really see the transition of what that love looked like. And even now looking at it, you can see a deeper love now with her in some aspects because of how she helped you get through this stuff.
100%. One of the terms I use is she's a beautiful scar. And it truly is, every day I'm thankful that I knew her and I was able to love her and be loved by her. I joke all the time, like, she went through 11 years of chemo. I don't know if it was for herself, her job that came first. I'm hoping I came second. So,
she was in healthcare. She was into helping individuals transition in life.
Yeah.
And she's still doing that through you.
Thank you.
And that's an important, that's a scar that you wear proudly each and every single day. And every connection that you make, she comes into play. And so even though physically she's gone, she is still doing her life's purpose through you with each and every single conversation that you have. So that is a value that you can't find everywhere.
Thank you so much for recognizing that. I want to tie that into something that I would just love for all your listeners to listen to. And, it sort of falls on the idea of leadership. We are all leaders if we step into it, because the example of how we live is the really only legacy we're ever going to leave. And so we want that to be a positive ripple. We want to be role models. And that's part of how I define leadership. But for me, when you say something like that, it is because that beautiful scar, what she gave me, is a ripple that doesn't stop. And it's the example of how she lived that shifted a lot of how I live.
Yeah. Well, continue, because it's amazing to watch it. And even more so in this conversation that we've had, seeing her come out in so many different ways of what you do. And it really is a life purpose that you've put together through that life coaching. You said you started out as a surviving spouse type mentality. And now you're more into the, how do I become the life coach? And you've done a really good transition with that.
Thanks. Yeah. I want everyone to step into that, using life instead of being used by life, because that's really what it's all about.
Absolutely.
We get to craft it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you continue to develop yourself, and I know that you have some book recommendations, and this is especially the one that you constantly every single year continue to read and find new stuff in. So why don't you give us your book recommendations?
Sure. So one of my all-time favorite books is Touching the Void. And of course, the author doesn't come to me because that is just the way it is with me. So it was a movie as well, I think in the late 80s or something like that. It's about a guy that was left for dead climbing Everest. And his journey back to base camp with a broken leg and just he was torn up, beaten up. His friend actually had to cut the rope and let him fall into an abyss because it was the only way for his friend to save himself. And he has this whole discussion about the two voices in his head, the voice saying give up and the voice saying go forward. And every year I reread that book, which is why I probably don't remember the author anymore.
It's Joe Simpson.
Joe Simpson. Thank you. Joe Simpson. Yes. While it's not, let's say, the most enjoyable read, A Man's Search for Meaning is something that I think everybody should read for sure. If I think of anything else that really resonates with me.
I actually just got a man's search for meaning in the mail 2 days ago. So I'm looking forward to cracking it open again. I've done it in the past, but I'm looking forward to rereading it. So.
Yeah, no, it's one of those that I think most books have something. If what else can I think of? I'd say those are the two that come to the top of my mind at the moment. There's another. If I had my phone, which I don't have my phone with me, I'd go through my my Audible, because there is another one that's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember it, that I absolutely love.
And we can always add them to the end of the description. So you got a little bit of time, a few weeks to be able to come up with that. I'll have all of the book recommendations in the description. Robert, do you have any final words for our listeners?
I do. I'd love to. I always end with a quote. It's a quote that I just absolutely love, and it's by Richard Bach, and it's from his book One. And it says that in this quote, we are each born with a block of marble and the tools to craft it into a sculpture. We can leave it untouched. We can pound it into gravel, or we can shape it into glory. And I focus on that every day, because I think that's what we're here to do, is shape it into glory. If you think about dragging it behind you untouched, that's inaction. Pounding it into gravel is anger, or shaping it into glory. So.
Wow. Well, Robert Pardi, the author of Possibility in Action, A Pimby Tale, and Chasing Life. Robert, we are blessed by having you here to speak to us, to impart, and to really invest in us. And I'm grateful that you took the time. We've now gone international with you in Italy, so I'm very excited about that. But today's episode is only possible thanks to my friend and producer, G. Frazier, with 369sounddesign.com. Robert, he's the one that makes me sound good each and every single week, or at least he attempts to. And I know that sometimes it can be a real drag on him because it takes a lot of hours to try to make me sound good. But we are blessed by the entire team here at the Wartime Leadership Podcast. See you next week. Be blessed.